Hello and welcome to Wake Up with Dr. Cheryl, Wealth Transformation. The theme of our show is to raise the consciousness and healing your relationship with wealth and currency and apply unconditional love. I'm doing something a little different today. I read a very interesting article recently that I would like to share. Charlie Reese's final column for the Orlando Sentinel. He has been a journalist for 49 years. He is retiring, and this is his last column. This is about as clear and as easy as you can understand it to be. Charlie Reese, a retired reporter from the Orlando Sentinel, has hit the nail directly on the head, defining clearly who it is that is in final analysis must assume responsibility for the judgments made that impact each one of us every day. 545 versus 300 million people by Charlie Reese. Politicians are the only people in the world who create problems and then campaign against them. Have you ever wondered if both the Democrats and the Republicans are against deficits? Why do we have deficits? Have you ever wondered if all the politicians are against inflation and high taxes? Why do we have inflation and high taxes? You and I don't propose a federal budget, the president does. You and I don't have the constitutional authority to vote on appropriations. The House of Representatives does. You and I don't write the tax code, Congress does. You and I don't set fiscal policy, Congress does. You and I don't control monetary policy, the Federal Reserve Bank does. 100 senators, 435 congressmen, 1 president, and 9 Supreme Court justices equates to 545 human beings out of the 300 million are directly, legally, morally, and individually responsible for the domestic problems that plague this country. I excluded the members of the Federal Reserve Board because that problem was created by the Congress. In 1913, Congress delegated its constitutional duty to provide a sound currency to a federally chartered but private central bank. I excluded all the special interests and lobbyists for a sound reason. They have no legal authority. They have no ability to coerce a senator, a congressman, or a president to do one cotton-picking thing. I don't care if they offer a politician $1 million in cash. The politician has the power to accept or reject it. No matter what the lobbyist promises, it is the legislator's responsibility to determine how he votes. Those 545 human beings spend much of their energy convincing you that what they did is not their fault. They cooperate in this common con regardless of party. What separates a politician from a normal human being is the excessive amount of gall. No human being would have the gall of a speaker who stood up and criticized the president for the creating deficits. The president can only propose a budget. He cannot force the Congress to accept it. The Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land, gives sole responsibility to the House of Representatives for originating and approving appropriations and taxes. Who is the Speaker of the House? John Bochner. He is the leader of the majority party. He and his fellow House members, not the president, can approve any budget they want. If the president vetoes it, they can pass it over his veto if they agree to. The House has passed a budget, but the Senate has not approved a budget over 3 years. The president's proposed budgets have gotten almost anonymous rejections in the Senate in the time. It seems inconceivable to me that a nation of 300 million cannot replace 545 people who stand convicted by present facts of incompetence and irresponsibility. I can't think of a single domestic problem that is not traceable directly to the 545 people. When you fully grasp the plain truth that 445 people exercise the power of the federal government, then it must follow that what exists is what they want to exist. If the tax code is unfair, it's because they want it to be unfair. If the budget is in the red, it's because they want it in the red. If the Army and Marines are in Iraq and Afghanistan, it's because they want them to be in Iraq and Afghanistan. If they do not receive Social Security but are on an elite retirement plan not available to the people, it's because they want it that way. There are no insoluble government problems. Do not let these 445 people shift the blame to bureaucrats whom they hire and those jobs they can abolish, to lobbyists whose gifts and advice that they can reject, to regulators to whom they give the power to regulate and from whom they can take this power. Above all, do not let them con you into belief that there exists mystical forces like the economy, inflation, or politics that prevent them from doing what they take an oath to do. Those 545 people, and they alone, are responsible. They and they alone have the power. They and they alone should be held accountable for the people who are their bosses. Provided the voters have the gumption to manage their own employees, we should vote all of them out of the office and clean up their mess. What do you do with the article now? Now that you've heard it, it's up to you. This is not a funny, this might be funny if it weren't so true. Tax his land, tax his bed, tax the table at which he's fed. Tax his tractor, tax his mule, teach him taxes are the rule. Tax his work, tax his pay. He works for peanuts anyway. Tax his cow, tax his goat, tax his pants, tax his coat, tax his ties, tax his shirt, tax his work, tax his dirt, tax his tobacco, tax his drink, tax him if he tries to think. Tax his cigars, tax his beers. If he cries, tax his tears. Tax his car, tax his gas. Find other ways to tax his ass. Oops. Tax all he has, then let him know that you won't be done till he has no dough. When he screams and hollers, then tax some more. Tax him till he's good and sore. Then tax his coffin, tax his grave, tax the sod in which he's laid. Put these words upon his tomb. Taxes drove me to my doom. When he's done, do not relax. It's time to apply the inheritance tax. Still think this is funny? Not one of these taxes existed 100 years ago, and our nation was the most prosperous in the world. We had absolutely no national debt at the largest middle class and the largest middle class in the world, and mom stayed at home with the kids. What in the heck happened? Can you spell politicians? Our special guest this evening is Roger Thomas. Roger Thomas is a captain of the Salty Lady. In capacity as president of GGFA, he works with the staffs and legislative members of both the California Assembly and Senate, in addition to working at a national level with staffs and congressional members on fishery and environmental legislation. At the state level, communicates and works with California Department of Fish and Game, the Fish and Game Commission, and the other regulatory entities in regards to regulations. As an advisor to the Pacific States Fishery Commission, he attends both in-state and annual meetings of the Commission, represents the Commission on an annual basis at the Washington level to meet with congressional staff and congressional members on fishery legislation, and works towards securing necessary funding to implement fishery programs for both California and the 5 western states that the Commission represents. This is the first segment of a 2-part discussion with Roger. Welcome, Roger. Thank you so much for coming, and I've been looking forward to this, having you on the show, because I think you have a wealth of information regarding our waters in the Bay Area and fish and et cetera. So welcome.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's always a good opportunity for me to talk about the industry I'm in and some of the things that affect the industry, and I always look forward to letting people know and seeing if we can all think about some of the problems and ways to correct them.
Right. Can you give us a little background on I know I introduced you with your governmental and official status, but just give us a little background where you're from.
My basic background is I was born and raised in Gilroy.
Oh, you're a native Californian then.
That's right, native California, now from what they call the garlic capital of the world. And when the years I lived there, or when I was born and raised for my through high school and stuff, it was raising prunes, not garlic.
Oh.
And then they raise garlic, and then they have a major manufacturing or processing plant there. Nobody raises garlic there now, but they process it.
Oh, okay.
And they bring it in from elsewhere.
Oh.
But anyway, and they have the big garlic festival, of course, so that's why it's called.
Have you ever tried the garlic ice cream?
No, I never have.
I've heard of it.
I never have. Actually, I left Gilroy in 1972, and that's about when they started the garlic festival. And because of the occupation I'm in, running a commercial passenger fishing vessel and taking people out in the ocean to fish for salmon and go bird watching and whale watching and bay cruises and all the other activities that I do on my boat, I work on weekends, and I haven't gone to the garlic festival.
Yeah.
But I was brought up by my uncle, basically, and he was a judge and a conservationist, and I'm a hunter also. I learned that hunting is fine as long as you eat what you shoot. And I know there's folks in the world that don't like hunters, but most hunters are really conservationists. We all contribute to Ducks Unlimited and California Waterfowl and to the wetlands, and all these outfits do good work with trying to bring the wetlands back and take care of the birds and deer and all the other critters, and we do the same thing in fisheries. We have what they call a commercial salmon stamp program that
Did you say salmon stamp?
Commercial salmon stamp program, and the commercial fleet started that back in 1978, and the money goes into a specific fund and is utilized for helping the hatcheries out, the tagging programs, improvement to the hatcheries, habitat, and all the things that salmon need. And our industry, the commercial passenger fishing vessel industry, by legislative action in 1983, joined that. And we're required to buy stamps depending on how many crew members you have, and the captain. In my particular case, it's a crew of 2, and that money goes into a fund, and there's a committee made up of the people who contribute that makes recommendations to the state where the money's spent.
So you're buying stamps? You're saying
well, it's a stamp that you have to have in order to fish for salmon from a vessel. In other words, my vessel has to be licensed, and if you were fishing commercially, which we aren't, we take passengers, you'd have to have one for yourself and one for your crew member. And the cost of the stamp fluctuates with the estimated size of the catch for the previous year. But all that money goes for conservation purposes. And
you feel confident that that's happening with that
money?
Oh,
yes. It's a very good program. We produce, we fund some of the hatchery activities. We fund the tagging of salmon. They're all, the state has a law that 25% of the fish that are produced at hatcheries have to be marked with a little thing they put in their head, and they clip the adipose fin, and when the fish is caught, the biologists who check the fish at the dock cut the head off, and they read that little marker, and the information is then transmitted for management purposes of how many fish are coming back, from what hatchery, when they were tagged, and you can tell what the successful programs are. If they released them at the hatchery versus trucking them down to the Golden Gate or barging them. they can tell what's the most effective way to preserve them.
So there really is a good control on that.
Well, it gives you good information.
Yeah.
And of course, with the water problems we have in California, and we have so many people, so much population nowadays, it's adversely changed for all the natural critters. You know, years ago, before the dams, you had very free flowing in all years, and the water went out the Golden Gate, and that's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to run to the west.
Yeah, from the mountain runoff.
From the mountains,
snow,
down the
yeah,
streams,
right.
out through the whole estuary. And our estuary and our delta is the largest in North America. And it isn't natural anymore because of the water that's taken out by both the state and federal pumps. And
So please explain that, what
well,
that means.
the state and federal pumps remove water from the south part of the delta, and there was canals built by the first Governor Brown, Edmund Brown, that took the water to Southern California, and then it's pumped from Bakersfield over the hill and into Southern California. It's a massive system. And you have both a state aqueduct and a federal aqueduct, and they can remove tremendous amounts of water. And so
Is there a limitation on that?
well, there is now because of the Federal Endangered Species Act
Okay.
on winter-run salmon, which reached a critical level years back, and the water flows have to be cut down at the times of the year that those fish move through the system, both as little ones and as big ones coming back.
Yeah.
And the water has to be regulated temperature-wise, flow-wise, and a whole bunch of different things to protect the endangered species. At the same time, not just salmon, but the delta smelt, which are a native species to the delta, are in trouble. So there's water regulations to try to protect them. But the massive amounts of water that get moved affect everything in the basic river systems and the delta and the bay, and in my opinion, in the ocean.
Do you think that, I mean, I don't quite understand, I mean, if they're taking water out and, moving it to Southern California, but if the water flow coming from the mountains is the same,
The water, well, if you had 100% of the water going to the ocean and through the delta, you wouldn't have any problems. The delta would get flushed out, the natural feed would be there, the habitat would probably be much better than it is now. But what happens is you get this flow coming down, and then it turns and starts out through the delta and down into San Pablo Bay and out in the ocean. And you had the San Joaquin River coming in from the south side. Now what happens is the water's out, coming down like this. They take the water out of the lower end, so the flows aren't full steam out this way. And because of the large amounts they take in low flow years, things don't get flushed out right, and you have more contamination.
So it's
more things going wrong that isn't like nature would be by itself.
okay. So it's man's manipulation.
Man-made manipulations. In fact, if they pump too much, they can even have reverse flows in the southern part of the delta and where the Sacramento-San Joaquin connect. And this affects the travel of the little fish. And there's all kinds of things, and all of us have worked throughout the years on corrections, and we have made some headway. And if it wasn't for the Endangered Species Act and some of the things that have transpired to cut back some of these water flows, we'd be in real tough shape for salmon.
Do you think that the Endangered Species Act is really being enforced?
It's being enforced when it comes to salmon. It's being enforced when it comes to delta smelt. Sometimes we think it should be enforced more when we're looking at it from a salmon perspective. Of course, the farmers in the South Valley that have water rights think the opposite.
Yeah.
So we're always butting heads with somebody.
Yeah.
There is some concerns of people, and myself being one of them, of what is transpiring with the oil fracking in the South San Joaquin Valley.
Can you explain that? I'm not really educated on that,
Well,
what that really
I'm not
means.
totally educated either, but it's my understanding when they use this new process to break up the ground way down where there's been oil previously, and then they get into the right rock and they break it up, and they utilize pumping water and stuff down there to extract the oil.
Oh.
And that's about as much as
okay.
I know about
All right.
it. But it uses large amounts of water.
Oh, okay.
And
But doesn't it contaminate the water when
Well,
it's doing that?
I'm not up to speed on that,
okay.
but I've read about it, and some people have the feeling that someday could really goof up the underwater supply of water, which people depend on in drought years when they can't get the water out of the canals because they're not
Right.
pumping it down.
Right.
So there's so many variables, you know, you'd have to talk to a expert, probably geologist or something that knows something about oil. I don't want to get into that,
Yeah,
but
I
there is
understand.
concerns that it could cause some serious problems.
Yeah. So,
It just adds to the total use of water, and California's got such a large population, and it's pretty obvious that there's a lot of things that could be done.
so
If
in
you
your
look at the
experience,
arid countries like the Middle East, they process the salt water and get it to fresh water and utilize that. Well, we haven't been able to build the facilities because of environmental concerns where they need to take the water. But I think now they're building something in one of the cities in Southern California,
oh,
and someday that'll probably have
I
to
mean,
be
they
all
need
over
it
the state.
worse than we do
That's
up
right.
here.
Yeah,
So,
Southern California has a water crisis also from the Colorado River because
Right.
it's serving a tremendous amount of people now and it didn't used to.
right, right.
But in regards to the fishing community and the health of the ocean, we're vitally concerned about the flows and how it affects things. And one thing that has always bothered me in my business, I do whale watching. And years ago when I started back in the very early 70s, the gray whale migration in particular used to migrate down the coast, and they used the coastline as their guideline for coming south. Gray whales migrate from the Bering Sea all the way to Mexico yearly to have their young, and then they come back and they bring the cows, bring back the calves. But we could just go right outside the Golden Gate, or right outside the harbor in Half Moon Bay, just half a mile or so, and we saw whales. And throughout the period of time from 1971 until now, the whales have moved further and further and further offshore. And Point Reyes is 30 some miles up the coast from the Golden Gate. And the whales used to come down and come right down the shoreline all the way down across the Golden Gate. Now they come down to Point Reyes and they turn and they go outside the Farallon Islands and then come down and go to Pigeon Point, which is 40 miles below the Golden Gate. But they stay offshore all that time. And then when they get to Pigeon Point, they still operate on what they used to operate on. They go right down the coastline again. So something has been going on and developing, and I think something is coming out with the water that's coming out of our whole delta and stuff, and making these whales go further offshore. They don't like the water. They don't like something.
The pollution that's in.
Well, could be pollution. It could be sewage that's been treated that comes out of the major cities in the delta. It could be agricultural runoff. It could be many things, and it's something that's doing it.
Right.
And you know, some people say, well, it's the ship traffic. Well, ship traffic has gone on forever. There may be more of it now. In some cases, for the offshore whales, they've changed the shipping traffic lanes. And I really am very curious about how that's going to work out. The reason they changed those,
What do you mean? And what?
well, there's traffic lanes. When you go outside the Golden Gate, there's the main ship channel. It's got buoys that mark it. It's a dredge channel because we have a sandbar outside the Golden Gate that goes offshore. It's a dredge channel so the large ships can come in. And then when they get to the end of that, there's what they call the San Francisco entrance buoys, 3 miles outside the main ship channel. And there's 3 traffic lanes, one going to the west, one going to the southwest, and one going straight to the south. And wherever the ships are going, they have to stay in that traffic lane. And there's both, and they use it for both ways, inbound and outbound. And they did a survey on the humpback whales where they were feeding, and somebody determined they thought it'd be better to move the traffic lanes where there hadn't been a lot reported.
Oh.
Well, time will tell, but the whales feed where the feed is, and if the feed
Right.
moves,
Yeah.
which you have no control, you can't tell the feed don't go in the traffic lanes.
Mother Nature.
That's right. So we'll find out what happens with that concept. You know,
How long
they-
has this been going
They
on?
just started it.
Oh.
And they've extended the western traffic lane more and go out further and turn up or down further offshore. But really, we probably don't have very good records of what was going on offshore because not that many people go out there.
Thank you so much
Welcome.
for being here and coming the distance that you have, and we'll see you again.
Good. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Roger.
Okay.
I'll leave you with this. Never give up on your purpose and passion. And even if you don't know what that is, work with integrity and have a positive attitude wherever you work. And please, first and foremost, with your family and friends, be grateful for what you have, who you are, and where you have come from. And be grateful for your freedom. And eat healthy. Good nutrition feeds the mind and your body temple. And don't forget to keep moving. Keep moving your body by working out. Feed your spirituality with meditation and prayer, with unconditional love, and love yourself unconditionally, which means stop judging and criticizing yourself and others, and share your abundance and wealth with others. Thanks for watching. Please support Marin TV that brings these messages. Remember, when fear knocks, let faith answer the door. Money is like love. It kills slowly and painfully the one who withholds it, and enlivens the other who turns it on his fellow man, by Khalil Gibran.